Hello, my name is Destiny, and welcome to my channel, Destined by Design for You. Today, we are continuing our message in the series When in Babylon, specifically focusing on Joseph. We've already looked at how his brothers sold him into slavery, how even as a slave he had favor, and then suddenly he was falsely accused and thrown into prison. And then, after spending many years in prison, he is finally exalted to the second highest position in the land, second only to Pharaoh himself. And through it all, whatever he faced, we see that Joseph remained faithful and he served God, whether he was being favored or whether he was being persecuted. Whatever position Joseph was in, he was serving the Lord. Now we pick up the story back in Genesis 42. Because what we find is after Joseph had been exalted to the second highest in the land, after he had been given a wife, after he had had his two children, and after the 5 years of plenty were over, and after 2 years of the famine, Joseph comes to another test. In Genesis 42, 6 through 9, it says, "And Joseph was the governor over the land, and he it was that sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brethren came and bowed down themselves before him with their faces to the earth. And Joseph saw his brethren, and he knew them. But he made himself strange to them, and spake roughly unto them. And he said unto them, Whence come ye? And they said, From the land of Canaan, to buy food. And Joseph knew his brethren, but they knew him not. And Joseph remembered the dreams which he dreamed of them, and said unto them, Ye are spies, to see the nakedness of the land ye are come." After all these years, just when Joseph's life is finally taking its turn for the better, just when he's getting a life of his own, the very men who betrayed him, the ones who sold him as a slave, come before him. And one of the first things Joseph does after recognizing them is remember the dreams where God had told him that he would be exalted above his brethren and above even his parents. This is Joseph's perfect opportunity for revenge. With his power, he could have had them enslaved. He could have had them humiliated. He could have even put them to death. At the very least, he could have stood up and boasted and see, look what I made of my life. You tried to destroy me, but look at what I've done. But Joseph does none of that. He doesn't reveal himself to his brothers at all. He does treat them roughly, and he does arrest them under suspicion of being spies for 3 days. But after those 3 days, he releases them and tells them that if they want to buy more food from him, they must bring their brother Benjamin to him. And so they leave one of the brothers as prisoner, and the rest return home with food for their family and with the decision of whether they would come back with Benjamin or not. The Bible doesn't clarify why Joseph does what he does. Was this a hope at getting revenge? Was this a test? We don't know. All we know is that Joseph sends away his brothers with food for the family, with the charge for them to come back with Benjamin to prove that they really aren't spies. And he even has their money put back into their packs so that all of the food that they've taken is free. And instead of his brothers rejoicing when they find this money hidden in their food, they are terrified because they are wondering what in the world is going on. Now, before they leave, Joseph overhears this conversation in Genesis 42, 21 through 24. And they said one to another, We are very guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the anguish of his soul when he besought us, and we would not hear. Therefore is this distress come upon us. And Reuben answered them, saying, Spake I not unto you, saying, Do not sin against the child, and ye would not hear? Therefore, behold, also his blood is required. And they knew not that Joseph understood them, for he spake unto them by an interpreter. And he turned himself about from them, and wept, and returned to them again, and communed with them, and took from them Simeon, and bound him before their eyes. When Joseph heard them talking about their betrayal of him, and how they knew that this was a consequence of what they had done, he wept. Was this the moment God softened his heart to his brothers, or was this just him dealing with the pain of their betrayal? And this is not the only time that we see him weep. When they return with Benjamin in Genesis 43:29 through 30, it says, "And he lifted up his eyes, and saw his brother Benjamin, and his mother's son, and said, Is this your younger brother, of whom ye spake unto me? And he said, God be gracious unto thee, my son. And Joseph made haste, for his bowels did yearn upon his brother, and he sought where to weep. And he entered into his chamber, and wept there. After this, he then feasts with his brothers, and sends them all on their way. But unbeknownst to them, he has laid a trap. In addition to placing their money in their sacks again, he has hidden his own silver cup inside Benjamin's sack. And he sends a servant to stop them and to search each of their bags. And when the cup is found, they all return with Benjamin. And Judah drew near unto Joseph and pleaded in Genesis 44, verses 33 through 34. Now therefore I pray thee, let thy servant abide instead of the lad a bondman to my lord, and let the lad go up with his brethren. For how shall I go up to my father, and the lad be not with me, lest peradventure I see the evil that shall come on my father. Joseph has set a trap. Benjamin has been accused of stealing this goblet from Joseph. And as a consequence, Joseph is going to take him as a servant or as a slave. But Joseph's brother pleads with him and says, please take me instead. And here's what happens in Genesis 45, 1 through 8. Then Joseph could not refrain himself before all of them that stood by him, and he cried, Cause every man to go out from me. And there stood no man with him, while Joseph made himself known unto his brethren. And he wept aloud, and the Egyptians and the house of Pharaoh heard. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I am Joseph. Doth my father yet live? And his brethren could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence. And Joseph said unto his brethren, Come near to me, I pray you. And they came near. And he said, I am Joseph your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. Now therefore be not grieved, nor angry with yourselves that ye sold me hither. For God did send me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years hath the famine been in the land, and yet there are 5 years in which there shall neither be earing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve you, and to preserve you a posterity in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God. And he hath made me a father to Pharaoh, and the Lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout the land of Egypt. Now Joseph reveals himself, but not in anger, not with a heart full of revenge. Instead, or even conceit, he says, It was not you who sent me, but God. God used what you did for evil for good, and not just for his good, but for the good of his brethren. Just imagine being able to forgive them for what they did and being able to bless them in spite of the fact that he had suffered because of their jealousy. He had suffered at their hands. And yet he says, God sent me before you to preserve life, not just his life, not just his brother's life, but his entire family's life. So instead of taking revenge or airing his grievances, he declares that it was God who went before him and sent him into the land of Egypt. He's not only forgiven his brothers for their betrayal, but he's now providing food for them throughout the famine, and he even arranges for the entire family to come and live in Egypt so that he can care for them throughout the famine. Joseph had 22 years to begrudge and grumble and complain about what his brothers had done to him. But instead, when the time comes that he could take revenge, when the time comes that he could rub it in their face, he doesn't. He weeps, he forgives, and he blesses those who cursed him, those very people who at one time had wanted him dead. It had taken about 22 years from the time that he was sold as a slave to the time that his brothers had returned. But Joseph still remained faithful, even when faced with the very people who had betrayed him. Joseph was faithful wherever he went, whether he was humbled or exalted, whether he was betrayed or honored. He was able to declare the faithfulness of God in all of it. Through him, not only was he blessed, not only was his family delivered, but all of Egypt prospered because of Joseph. What his brothers had done was evil and wicked. But God blessed Joseph and used Joseph mightily because of his faithfulness. What was meant to destroy Joseph, God used to exalt Joseph, to bless the family of Jacob, and to even bless Egypt. We find that even years later on his deathbed, he did not curse his brethren or their families, but instead prophesied, saying in Genesis 50, verse 24, "And Joseph said unto his brethren, I die, and God will surely visit you, and bring you out of this land unto the land which he sware to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob." And then later, Genesis 50, verse 26, "So Joseph died, being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put into a coffin in Egypt." We find that even once his brothers had been returned and his family was reunited, he still was prophesying and believing good for his family, that they would return to the land of promise, that they would receive what God had for them. From the time of Joseph's dream to its fulfillment was roughly 22 years, and his total life was 110 years. The dream that God had given him may have cost him, and he may have suffered for a time, but those 22 years could not compare to the years that God gave him after. And the dream they said he and in the dream that said he would be exalted amongst his family resulted in him being exalted over all of Egypt, saving nations from famine, having his family restored to him, being able to have his father in his final years, and Joseph himself was able to live such a long life that he was even able to see his great great grandchildren. What looked like death, what looked like destruction, what looked like the ultimate betrayal, God used for Joseph's good because he was obedient, because he remained faithful. And not only was he able to remain faithful, but in all of it, he was able to declare the faithfulness of God and the sovereignty of God over all that he had faced. That's why, like Paul in Philippians 4, verses 11 through 13, Joseph could say, "Not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. I know both how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I am instructed both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ, which strengthen me. Not only was he able to live that out, he also lived out Colossians 3, verses 23 through 24. And whatsoever ye do, do it heartily, as to the Lord, and not unto men, knowing that of the Lord ye shall receive the reward of the inheritance, for ye serve the Lord Christ. Joseph served just as faithfully when he was a slave as he did later when he was in prison. And even after he was removed from prison, he served just as faithfully for Pharaoh. And even after his brothers were returned to him and he began to have a better life, a life that was filled with ease compared to his previous life, he continued to serve faithfully. It didn't matter where Joseph was, he served the Lord. He served the Lord in his troubles, he served the Lord in the trials, he served the Lord in the testing, but he also served God in the victories. He also served God when he was exalted, and he was able to serve God even when he was given rest. And this is what God expects of us. As children of God, we are expected to serve him faithfully, whatever our circumstances, whether we face trials or triumph. We must remember that he is in control and declare his faithfulness and his sovereignty, serving him wherever we are at. He wants us to walk in integrity, not abusing our position of favor, nor letting our position of favor corrupt us. When we serve him faithfully, when we walk in obedience, and when we declare that he is God and he is faithful, we cannot imagine what God will do in and through our lives. God can take the very thing that looked like it was going to destroy us and use it not only for our good, but for the good of others and for his glory. By doing these things, by walking in his favor, by walking in obedience, by declaring his faithfulness, we can fulfill Mark 5:16 that says, "Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven." Whether Joseph was a slave, a prisoner, or a governor of the land of Egypt, people looked at his life and they saw the favor of God, and they saw that Joseph walked in wisdom. When they looked at his life, they could not deny that God was with him. So, like Joseph, we are to serve faithfully wherever we are, whatever we face, and trust that the Lord is faithful and in control. And whether we suffer or whether we have victory, we give all glory and honor to God. Until next time, keep serving the Lord faithfully. Keep trusting in him. And I look forward to talking to you again. Have a good one.